To Save a Hobbit by Random Plot Bunny. Chapter 9. He was looking for a word, a very specific word. Clingy! That was it. Thorin was being clingy, and it was getting very annoying. Ever since Oin had taken him off bed rest several days prior, Bilbo simply couldn't shake the regal dwarf no matter what he tried. If it wasn't for his having a room to himself and his insistence that he preferred to sleep alone, a lie, but it worked to keep Thorin out, he was almost sure that Thorin would try and follow him to bed as well. And the fact that he'd started having fainting spells at random intervals, Oin said that it was part of the final stage of his disease, wasn't helping him in his argument for greater independence. It just made their leader seem more justified with never letting him out of his sight. The small man had previously prepared himself to face any number of reactions from the king once he found out about his illness, but this hadn't even been considered. An angry Thorin had seemed like the most likely to happen, and an accepting Thorin had been a close second. He had even considered a hurt Thorin, as unlikely as it sounded, that didn't understand why he was the last to know. But not once had he ever even thought to consider a clingy Thorin as a possibility, and now he was regretting it. He was just glad that they would be leaving Lake Town soon to continue the quest. The journey should take Thorin's mind off of him and give him some breathing space. He just couldn't cope with all the attention he was receiving from the intense dwarf. He had been wrong! Leaving Lake Town had made things worse. Now he didn't even have a room to go hide in. They were almost to the mountain, and Bilbo was starting to think that facing Smaug would be a picnic compared to arguing with Thorin about why he should be allowed to carry his own pack. And the fact that the dwarf thought he was helping just made it even worse because Bilbo couldn't stay mad at him because of it. Thorin was always fussing over him now, making sure his bedroll was dry and perfectly placed by the fire, seeing that he had plenty to eat, and then watching to ensure that he ate it all, sleeping extra close to him. He had woken up, pulled into, and snuggled up to Thorin's chest more than once to provide extra warmth. It was just becoming too much to put up with. The last straw came the day after they began searching for the hidden door. Master Baggins, you look tired. I could carry you for a little while if you wish. It was meant to be helpful, Bilbo would tell himself later. But in that moment, the only thought to cross his mind was, carry me? I'm not a child! The next several minutes were all a blur for the Hobbit as he lost his temper with the regal dwarf and gave him a verbal lashing that would have made his Took mother proud. Later, he would be disappointed when he couldn't remember a word that he had said. The last thing he saw before stalking off was Thorin's shocked face and Wallen's amused one just behind it. You have been hovering a bit much here lately, the warrior rumbled as the burglar moved off in a well-deserved huff. I just want to take care of him, Thorin said in an unusually small voice. Bilbo rounded a large rock formation just then and didn't hear any more of the conversation between the two old friends. The sun was nearing the horizon when Bilbo jerked awake from another fainting spell. They were really becoming a nuisance and happening far too close together for his liking, but at least now he could tell when one was coming on and prepare himself so as to prevent a fall that could potentially hurt him, and saw that he had accidentally found the door that they had all been looking for. Over here! I found it! He cried out, bringing the company to him immediately. They congratulated him for finding it, and then they opened it. It was dark, was Bilbo's first impression, but seeing the awe on his friends' faces, he tried to see it through their eyes. To them, this was home. A home that they never thought to see again. Thinking of it that way made Bilbo think of the Shire. It was so far away and completely lost to him now. He was suddenly very homesick. Squaring his shoulders and pushing those kinds of thoughts away, Bilbo asked for directions on where he should head to within the mountain. He was here for a reason, after all. There was so much gold. He had been told stories about the great wealth of Erebor, but he had never imagined anything on this scale. Mountains, hills, and valleys of the precious metal covered every surface that Bilbo could see, and probably a far greater area than he could imagine, too. There were even rivers of gems gleaming through the whole setup. Climbing to the top of one large pile, Bilbo looked down and gasped as he recognized what he was standing on. It was Middle-earth! The vast treasures had been meticulously set up to form a giant map of Middle-earth as seen from the air. He knew this because his love of maps and journal, and he knew this specifically because the section he was looking down at was the Shire. His home was right there under the mountain, beautifully laid out, every stream and hill picked out in shades of green and blue. Tearing his eyes away, he couldn't stand there forever, not when he had a job to do, Bilbo reluctantly continued on. Though he did amuse himself slightly by rewalking his journey while trekking over the large map. He had passed Rivendell and just crested the recreated Misty Mountains ridgeline when he felt it, another feint coming on. This would make his third one of the day. 6 in one day was his record so far. So he carefully started to lay himself down on the hard, cold metal coins he'd been walking on. But then he began to slide. Unable to brace himself and quickly losing consciousness, Bilbo simply had to let the slide stop on its own, which it did a moment later. His last thought before the darkness took him was to wonder why the gold no longer felt cold under him. Bilbo blinked his eyes open and then wished that he hadn't. "Finally awake then, are you? Now, maybe I will get some answers." Bilbo could only stare blankly up at the giant dragon in front of him as he carefully sat up. Why wasn't he dead yet? He asked himself, but promptly received no answer as he knew that he didn't know. "Now, tell me, just why is a hobbit that smells of a slow death and a company of dwarves skulking around my hoard? Answer me, and don't be boring." Not knowing what to say, Bilbo went with the first thing that popped into his mind, no matter how crazy it was. "I think I'll sleep on that one." He then lay back down, pulled his coat tighter around him, and let his permanent state of exhaustion do the rest. For his part, Smaug simply lay where he was and watched the small creature, that by all rights he should have killed the moment he had woken up to find it laying unconscious across his nose, sleep with an oddly peaceful expression upon its face. Well, he thought, at least it's not being boring.